Hello, my name is LoG, and welcome to part 2 of this journey into the sound known as Diminished 7. In part 1, we went over the unique structure of this sound and why that unique structure makes it so easy to come up with leads, chords, or ideas in general across the fretboard. Well, in part 2, we're going to take all of these Diminished 7 tools that we've learned and start to use them as extra colors in our improvising while we play over a minor chord. I'm going to demonstrate this over a backing track that is basically just an A minor chord, and every time I'm using the sound, you will see this symbol pop up in the corner. Let's first listen to what this solo sounds like, and then we'll get started. So before we begin, if you are interested in the solo that you just heard, as in the notes I'm playing, the exact shapes that are happening, what I'm thinking about when I put it together, the techniques I'm using, I will be putting together a full video tutorial for that solo, and I will be releasing it tomorrow through the Patreon. So if you are a patron, keep your eyes open for that video. If you are not a patron, you can check out the Patreon at the link in the description. So what we're going to do now is take all of these Diminished 7 ideas that we've already learned, the shapes, the copy and pastable nature of everything, how to create licks, the chord shapes, all that stuff, and figure out how to use these sounds on top of a normal minor chord, just like a static minor chord. And the minor chord we're going to be playing over today will be A minor, the chord that's happening in this backing track. It's not 100% A minor. There's a couple other little notes, but it's mostly A minor. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to use this diminished sound in the classic way that it's used to this minor chord as a transition, a sound that points your ears towards that minor chord. And in fact, the short that I originally made, it was kind of the catalyst for this video, talks about one of the main ways to find this sound. And that is very simply looking for the starting locations for these diminished ideas. And in that video, I talked about the easiest starting location to find, which is the note back 1 fret from the root of the minor chord you are playing. So if I'm playing A minor, which I am in this case, all you do is look for a root, which is right here, move back 1 fret, and start your diminished ideas right there. It could be a very simple, tiny melody, right back to A minor. It could be a monster lick if you want. Or it can be a little chord shape if you want. If you're playing A minor, go back a fret, start the chord right here on that note, back a fret from the root, and resolve back into A minor. It could be anything that you've already rehearsed or already learned. All you have to do is look for your root, go back a fret, start your diminished idea. Now, to really be able to do this, you have to have all of the roots of the minor chord that you are playing over highlighted while you are playing, so you know exactly where to start those ideas. Because I know the fretboard, I can tell you where all the starting locations are. Here's an A, that's my root. There's one right here, there's one right there, there's one right here, there's one right there. I can even move up here, A, all the different A's. And because I know where all of those roots are, I can easily just look at one like this one, move to the left 1 fret, start any diminished idea I want right there. A little melody, maybe a little chord, and resolve eventually back to A minor. All of those things are possible because I know where all the roots are. Well, if you don't know where all the roots are, I will say you're making a massive mistake by not thinking about one of the core fundamental notes of the sound. You don't want to just pop your fingers down on a finger pattern and say, I'm playing A minor because the scale is telling me I am. You want to say, no, I'm playing A minor because here are the notes, here are all of my A's. And if you can do that, if you can target these notes, extremely easy to get in and out of this diminished sound. Getting into it is one thing, which we just talked about one way to do it by simply looking for a root going to the left 1 fret and then playing the sound. But then getting out of it is also important. I might say even more important, because that's where that resolution comes from. We're playing the diminished sound to kind of bring out this kind of interesting, kind of tense color, and then it resolves, giving you this satisfying kind of landing when you move back to the A minor. And one of the main reasons why it has kind of a tense flavor when you do it is actually that one starting location we just talked about, which is what? So if I'm playing A minor, right? Here's a root, one of the starting locations, again, back a fret. What note is this? This is A flat, G sharp. I'm going to call it G sharp. Earlier I was calling this note A flat. Now I'm going to call it G sharp because that is the note that leads into A, right? G sharp, and this particular note is actually not in a standard A minor sound. It's not an A minor pentatonic. What note is in A minor pentatonic? Well, if I play 1 octave right here, A, C, D, E, G, and then A, or A minors, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, and then 1. We're not playing G or flat 7. We are playing G sharp. This would be the normal 7, the major 7. How do I know that? Because that's the 7 that exists in an A major scale. If I play an A major scale, check out what note is the 7th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. There's that G sharp, the note back a fret. So we're pulling this note. This note really comes from A major, right? But we're playing it in a minor context, which gives us the sound of an A minor chord with a major 7 like this, right? Off the bat, that's kind of an eyebrow-raising sound because it's not a sound you're going to hear all the time in a standard minor context, right? Now, many people will say, oh, I'm playing harmonic minor right there. That's the harmonic minor scale. That's where the note comes from. Sure, you can say that. I don't think about that whatsoever. I think it's a waste of time. And in fact, that note is really coming from a specific other chord that we will talk about later on in this video, which is also the chord where all of this diminished stuff comes from, which is also what I talked about in that preliminary lesson I linked that takes you to kind of the origin of diminished 7. If you haven't seen that, check the description. So we'll get into that once we get there. Regardless, this note right here, when we play it, is going to be an out-sounding note, a mildly out-sounding note, which is the whole point of this diminished sound. It pulls your ears into this kind of tense sort of sound, and then when you resolve, it sounds pretty natural. It sounds satisfying. I'll play just a little bit of that over the backing track. A minor. About as simple as it gets. A little bit of diminished. I'll do it up top. Back a fret. About as simple as it gets. How about a little chord? Right? See, I just played right there. Pause the track. I played a diminished chord. How did I know to play it right here? Because I see my root, go back a fret, start the chord. I also copied and pasted up 3 frets and then resolved back to A minor. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the resolution later on in the video, but I'll just kind of say what I'm probably going to say later on. I am mostly doing this by ear. There are some strategies you can use to figure out how to get out, which we'll talk about a little bit, but I'm mostly doing it by ear. It takes a second to get your ears comfortable with the sound, but in my opinion, doing it by ear is going to be the best choice when it comes to resolving. So now that we know this starting location that we can play all of our diminished ideas on, we can just always look for that one note back a fret from the root and always have a place to go to use this diminished sound. But there's something interesting we have to think about. Remember, all of these diminished ideas are kind of copy and pastable. So for example, if I play, here's my root A, move to the left 1 fret and play a diminished chord, let's say, off of this note right here, I know I can just move this up 3 frets, copy and paste to here, and this is also the same diminished chord, which means this note was a starting location, back a fret from the root, of course, but this note is also a starting location because this is the same as that. So that means if we want to really be able to play this diminished sound on top of this A minor chord, we need to find all of the starting locations. And to put it simply, any of the notes of this diminished 7 sound can be a potential starting location. So let's just figure out what all of the notes would be and how they fit over A minor. So I'm going to go down to the low E string to kind of make it visually easy to see everything. Here's my A, of course, the root of the chord. We know the main starting location we just talked about was simply back 1 fret, right? That's one of the locations. This note is G sharp, okay? If I fill out the rest of the diminished sound, all 4 notes, what would the notes be? G sharp, of course, up a minor third takes me to the next note, that's B. Up another minor third, I'll play right here, that's a D. Up another minor third, I'll play right here, that's an F. By the way, same 4 notes we've been talking about throughout this whole series, except earlier I was calling that an A flat, now I'm calling it a G sharp. If I'm on this F and I move up another minor third, maybe I'll go down a string right here, that's G sharp again, back to the beginning. So again, we have a total of 4 notes, G sharp, B, D, and then F, okay? What are those notes of the actual sound we are playing at this moment, the A minor? Let's figure it out, because once we know that, we will have all of the starting locations to play this sound as a transition into our minor chord. We know the note back 1 fret, the G sharp, back 1 fret from the root. Of course, that's the 7, right? Back a fret from the root, easy. What about the next note? This is a B. What is B in relation to A minor? That would be A minor's 2. How do I know? Because if A is the root, the note up a whole step, B in this case, is the 2. 2 is always up a whole step from 1. Just look at like a major scale, right? Play a major scale. Look at the second note. That's up a whole step. That's also called the 2. Really pretty note as well. You can play minor and then add in like a 2 on top. Very nice sound. That note is also, by the way, in most minor contexts that you'll find yourself in. It's not necessarily in the pentatonic, but you can easily toss it in there. Many people do, as opposed to the original starting location that we had. That note is not really in your average minor context, but the next location, this 2, is. So that note might be more readily available for you to hit. What about the next note of the diminished sound? We played B, down a minor third. That takes us to D. What is D of A minor? Easiest way to figure this out is look at your root, and we're just dropping down a string. If you ever have a root and you drop down a string, you are playing that root's 4 or 4th. Obviously, if we're doing this on the G to the B string, not the case, because tuning issue of the guitar, our 4th would be here, not just down a string. But on every other string, if you play a root, drop down a string, you are playing that root's 4. If you want to see it, I can just simply play a major scale. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bam, there's that note, that D. A, B, C, D. You can also walk up to it like that. This note is pretty convenient because not only is it a normal minor note, we're already playing that note in minor pentatonic, right? It's all over the place. If I play minor pentatonic, that's 4 right there. There's my root, drop down a string, 4. That is another starting location for these diminished ideas. So far we can start diminished on the 7, the note to the left of 1 fret of the root. On the 2, easy note to find. On the 4 of A minor, of our minor chord, very easy to find. And then where's the next note? Here's that note, up 1 final minor third, takes us here. What note is this? This is an F. What is that in relation to A, the root of our minor chord? Here's A. I can easily see E right there, up a power chord, right? That's a 5th. What note is up a fret from the 5th? That would be a note called flat 6, okay? Not really a note in the pentatonic, but it is a note in a variety of different minor situations. If you play standard like minor scale, like you're playing like a 6-chord minor, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, right? Flat 7, 1, pretty common note in many minor situations. That note is another starting location for our diminished idea. So let's recap. If you are playing a minor chord and you want to play these diminished sounds, licks, chords, whatever, as a transitional sound to push you back into the minor sound, you start the ideas on that minor chords, 7, 2, 4, or flat 6. Any of those notes will yield the same diminished because that diminished is always made of the same 4 notes, always minor thirds apart, copy and pasteable, all of that good stuff. Let's try this out. I'm going to play this over a backing track, play some very, very simple ideas, and you'll see exactly what I mean. So let me pull up this track. Let's start by playing, we already kind of started on the note to the left of the root. Let's experiment with starting on the 2 of the chord. Again, very easy to find. Where are my roots? Root, 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 go up a whole step, bam, that's the 2 starting location. Let's try it out. A minor. Here's our root, 2. Right? That was a tiny little diminished piece right there. I'm playing a tiny piece, 5 notes worth, something like that. Here's another 2 location. 1, flat 3. 2 is to the left 1 fret. So, right? So that time I played a little bit more of a diminished sound. I kind of slid back to the 2, copy, paste up 3 frets, and then looked for a place to resolve. Sounds pretty good, right? Sounds exactly the same as the other one I was doing off of the 7 because it is the same thing. How about a chord shape? Watch this. Remember we talked, when we were talking about chords, we could play a chord shape, but any of these notes could be the potential root, the potential starting note. So here's my root, right? I can say, oh, I'm going to go to the 2, which is up a whole step. Play the diminished chord right there. Bam. Perfect. Resolve. Nice. But you know what else I can do? Here's my root. I can go to the 2 here and play the chord with that note as the top. What would it be? This shape right here. And that is going to be the same diminished sound, which we will use to resolve back in A minor, right? What else can I do? Here's A. I see a 2 right there. I can play this low diminished chord right there. Also the same thing. Here's something else. I can play A minor. I see this 2, because that's up a whole step from that root, or up a whole step from this root, and I can just make sure that note is just in the diminished chord I'm about to play, which would be this, right? Look at the bass note. The bass note's not 2, neither is the high note, but it doesn't matter. As long as one of these notes is the 2 of your minor chord, you are playing that transitional diminished. And there it is. I can play it and resolve to that final A minor however I want. Let's try some chords, see what this sounds like. A minor, there's a 2 right here, diminished. Minor. We do some copy and pasting. 2 right there, up, minor. Right? Check this out. Here's A, my root, there's 2. Play diminished as the top note. How about this? Chord, copy, paste, resolve. See how easy it is to do that? If you know these starting locations. And you can probably bet I could just do the same exact thing for the other starting locations. How about the 4? Where is that? Find your root, go down a string, bam, that's 4. Start your lick right there, or start your chord right there, doesn't matter. I can play A minor. That's the 4. I'm on that note, kick into some sort of diminished idea. How about this? Because I was on my middle finger right there, maybe I'll play this. Start here, down a string, same string, down a string, and resolve finally to A minor. Let's do that exact lick. Here's A, go to the 4, drop down a string. Diminished. Right, that was a little copy and pasting, right? Just moving through the shape, very simple, kind of walking up. I think I went up 1 more right there, but you see the idea. And then, of course, we have the last starting location, the flat 6, which is where? Up a fret from your 5th. Here's A, up a power chord, bam, up a fret. That's a starting location. Play a chord, copy and paste, do whatever you want. Play a little lead. How about play like a bigger one? Something like that, resolve. I'll try that exact lick right there. A minor. Back to A minor. So I just did a relatively large run off of this flat 6. Flat 6, a starting location, right? Down a string, minor third, down a string, minor third, same string, minor third, down a string, minor third. Just flowing through the shape in a way that makes sense, right? All of those notes, starting locations, memorize them. Look at the fretboard, be able to see your basic notes that you have available, and locate these notes. If you are not thinking about the notes on the fretboard, this is going to be more difficult than it should be, right? This is why actually taking the time to learn the instrument properly makes applying concepts like this incredibly easy. If you ignore this stuff, what I'm doing right now will be difficult. But it's not because it is difficult. It's because you haven't taken the time to actually learn the instrument. If you know the instrument, this stuff is so simple, right? It's so easy for me to get in and out of these sounds. Not because I'm like a genius. It's because I've taken the time to prioritize actually looking at the fretboard and knowing what is in front of me. I know where the roots are. If I know where the roots are, move back a fret. Done. I know where the root is. I can move up a whole step. That's 2. Starting location. Done. I know where the fifths are. Move up a fret. That's flat 6. Done. It's not difficult unless you are just autopiloting your way through your guitar playing life. If you're doing that, yeah, this stuff's going to be tricky. But if you're taking that extra moment to think about the notes under your fingers, getting in and out of this sound, not difficult at all. So if you want to get into this, maybe use this as an example to really learn at least where your roots are. Right? And if you want to know where the roots are, by the way, you can check out the very first video of my Patreon, which goes over the pretty classic kind of common way to find all the notes on the fretboard using the octave shapes, all that stuff. Regardless, knowing the notes under your fingers and what those notes are in relation to everything else makes this stuff so easy. So before we move on to the final part of this video where we go over a different backing track with another chord added to the mix, I want to talk briefly about resolving out of this diminished sound into the minor sound that we're playing. So far I've kind of just been doing it by ear, by intuition, but there are some strategies you can think about. So first of all, what do I mean by resolving? I just mean getting away from that diminished chord back into the minor chord in a way that is satisfying to the ear. So there are some strategies to do this. One of them is very simply this. Let's say I'm playing a diminished sound. There's my root. I start here, one of the starting locations for this diminished, that's the 2, and I play a lick like this. And this note is the final note of the diminished sound I'm playing, and the next note needs to be back into the A minor. Well, look at what note this is. That is the 7 of A minor, the note back 1 fret from the root of A minor, back 1 fret from A. So naturally, that note is probably going to just move up and resolve cleanly back into A. So a way that you could resolve this diminished idea is very simply moving back up a fret into that chord tone, into the A. So what you could do is you could just look at each note, each starting location of the diminished sound, and say, where would that note naturally move if I wanted to get back into A minor? So let's just do that real fast. So if this is the root of A, if I'm playing and I end my diminished idea here, that's the one we just did, that's going to resolve up a fret to A minor. Now what happens if I'm playing diminished and I end on this note, the 2? Where will that note naturally resolve? Most people would probably say that's going to move up a fret to the flat 3 and resolve like that. But that note could also resolve back to the root. Could do that too. Bum, bum, back to the A minor. Okay, what's another starting location? The 4, where would this note resolve to? So you're playing and you play some diminished idea, like whatever. You get here and you need to resolve. This note could resolve back to the flat 3, back 2 frets. Bum, bum. Could also resolve up a whole step, up 2 frets to the 5. Bum, bum. It's also possible. And then the final starting location would be where? The flat 6, the note up a fret from the 5. There's 5, up a fret. You play a little diminished lick, and now you need to resolve out of this note. Most people would say this note resolves back to the 5, bottom to A minor. So a little diminished idea, maybe a chord, bum, bum, resolve like that. You can just strategize your way through all of that and keep in mind the notes you're playing and go through that process. To be honest, personally, while all of that is good, thinking about it, in my opinion, it just takes too much brain power. Personally, I just play this and let my ears guide me. The more you do this, your ears will hear where the notes need to go, and you will naturally make choices based purely off of your ear and off of your intuition. Some people will be okay with actually mapping out literally every note and having like an Excel spreadsheet. This note goes there and that note goes there and all that stuff. And that's not really my style. Personally, I'm way more just do it by ear kind of person. It's up to you, up to whatever makes sense to you. But I definitely think regardless of your approach, your ears need to be able to hear these movements. So the best thing you can do is just turn on a backing track, play, and this is crucial, very slowly, and make sure you're really listening to how these notes should naturally move. The reason why I mentioned slowly is if you're playing licks that are super fast and you're not used to this sound, your ear hasn't gotten used to these movements, the notes are going to be happening too fast for your ears to keep up. And if your ears can't keep up, your ears aren't going to be able to tell you where to go. So start really slow. And once your ears get comfortable with those sounds at a slow tempo, you can start to increase and see if your intuition points you in the right direction. And also, as you're moving through, just scan the fretboard. And again, knowing the fretboard obviously really helps with this. Scan the fretboard and look for where the nearby chord tones are, and you can lock into those chord tones when you feel like you have to. So here's the track. I'll just play something really simple. A minor, right? So right there, I played a lick that basically was this. I started on 4, starting location, come down, simple diminished. And I ended here. I can already tell, bottom, that's the 7 of A to the root of A. Another thing that you'll hear me do a lot, I haven't really been doing it yet, is singing everything I'm doing. If you can sing what you're doing as you're playing it, that just means you know, your ears and your brain know what the notes are before you play. And if you know what the notes are, much easier to make musical choices. So sing everything that you're doing. So I'll try it. Register, it's a little tough to do that, but that really is the best way, in my opinion, to train your ears to hear these movements. I'm also not playing super technical. I'm not playing super fast. I'm really just isolating this diminished sound in the simplest way possible, thinking about the starting locations, using my ear to point me towards those resolved notes. That does it for part 2 of this series on Diminished 7. As usual, if you enjoyed this approach and this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my entire guitar method through my Patreon at the link in the description. In part 3, we will continue to use this Diminished 7 idea in our improvising, except over a slightly different but very important chord progression. See you there.